Bastila Shan had always known that battle meditation was not a weapon in the ordinary sense, and perhaps that was why the council feared it less than they should have. A lightsaber showed its hunger openly. A blaster barked and left a body behind. A mind waited without conscience in the dust. But battle meditation moved like a prayer through the minds of soldiers who never knew they had been touched. It steadied hands. It sharpened instincts. It stitched courage into men already unraveling. It bent the balance of a fleet by fractions too subtle to see until the dead began to pile up only on one side. The Republic called it a gift. The Jedi called it service. Bastila had once called it duty, because duty was a word that allowed a person to live with almost anything. Now she stood aboard the Endar spire while Terrace turned below them like a wounded jewel, all bruised oceans and lights burning through atmosphere, and she could feel 10,000 minds reaching for her without knowing her name. Republic pilots were whispering charms in their cockpits. Junior officers were tasting copper fear. Medics were checking the straps on trauma pallets. Gunners were pretending not to see their hands shake. Above them all, through the cold geometry of space, came the Sith fleet. Not a rabble. Not raiders drunk on conquest. The Sith came in formation, their capital ships black against the starlight, their engines red as banked coals, their lines so disciplined that even the silence between them felt commanded. At their head moved the Leviathan, vast and pitiless, a dagger of Durasteel aimed at the heart of the Republic position. Bastila sensed Darth Malak before the alarms found him. He was not simply anger. Anger had heat, shape, direction. Malak was a furnace whose doors had been torn away. His presence pressed against the Force with a brutal metallic certainty, as though the galaxy itself were an obstacle he intended to cut down. Somewhere aboard that ship, behind armor and command codes and the devotion of terrified servants, he waited for her to reach out. He expected it. That knowledge chilled her more than the fleet. "Commander," one of the bridge officers said, his voice tight. "The Admiral is requesting confirmation. Are we initiating meditation support?" The question passed through the room like a draft under a door. Heads turned. Not all the way. Not openly. But enough. Bastila did not answer at once. The war room was crowded with bodies, and yet she felt alone at its center. Around her, holodisplays shimmered with ship positions, casualty predictions, shield harmonics. Blue Republic icons bent around Terrace, outnumbered almost 2-1. Red Sith markers advanced with merciless patience. A few months ago, she would already have closed her eyes. A few months ago, she would have surrendered herself to that vast listening dark, opened the inner gates of her mind, and cast her will through the Republic line until the frightened became brave and the uncertain became precise. She had done it over Siroko's blackened plains. She had done it above Ord Mantell, where an entire wing of Republic fighters had flown like one living creature beneath her unseen hand. She had done it in skirmishes that became victories, and victories that became speeches, and speeches that became portraits of her in Senate corridors she had never wanted to walk. Then had come the dreams. Not visions, the masters insisted. Exhaustion, strain, echoes of the war. But Bastila knew the difference between a dream and the Force placing a cold finger beneath the chin. In the dreams, she stood in a hall of mirrors and saw thousands of soldiers looking back. Their mouths opened, and her voice came out of them. She raised her hand and fleets died smiling. She reached for courage and found obedience. Each night the mirrors cracked a little more, until one by one the reflected faces became Sith. And always, somewhere behind her, a man with no face laughed softly. Revand. The name was not spoken on Republic bridges unless necessary, and never by Jedi who valued peace of mind. Revan was gone, they said. Captured, broken, dead, hidden, redeemed, damned. The truth changed depending on which whisper one caught in which corridor. Yet his absence had weight. It pulled on events like a moon pulled tides. The Republic still fought the war he had made. Malak still ruled from the throne he had stolen. The Jedi still measured every decision against the shape of Revand's shadow. And Bastila, though she had survived the strike team that brought him down, carried something from that day she could not name. When she had reached into the force during the assault on Raven's flagship, she had felt his mind for one terrible instant. Not merely touched it, fallen into it. A mind like a star map carved into living fire. Strategy, grief, rage, compassion, arrogance, sacrifice, all moving at once with impossible purpose. She had expected darkness and found a storm. She had expected a monster and found a wound large enough to swallow empires. Then Malak had fired upon his master's bridge, and the world had become light. Bastila still woke sometimes with the taste of smoke in her lungs. "Padawan Shan," the officer prompted, too frightened to remember that she was no longer merely a Padawan in the eyes of the fleet, whatever the council preferred to call her. Across the chamber, Captain Thorne looked up from the central projector. His hair was silver at the temples, his cheeks hollowed by months of retreat. He had never liked relying on Jedi, but he liked dying less. "We need every advantage," he said. "Every advantage." There it was, the phrase that excused all slow corruptions. Bastila looked through the viewport. Terrace rolled beneath them, unaware of the small debate occurring above its clouds. Billions lived down there in layers of wealth and rust, nobility and towers, workers and choking streets, outcasts beneath them all. If the Sith broke the fleet, Terrace would not be shielded by innocence. Malak would punish the planet for hosting Republic vessels, for slowing him, for existing in the path of his need. If she did nothing, people would die. If she acted, people would die differently. Her hands folded inside her sleeves. No one saw her nails bite into her palms. A Jedi does not dominate. That was one of the first teachings, offered to children too young to understand how much of adulthood consisted of choosing one form of domination over another. A Jedi could persuade, defend, disarm, sacrifice. A Jedi could cut through a body if the cause was just and the need dire. Yet the mind was sacred. The will was sacred. To enter another living being with power, to turn their fear into courage not earned but imposed, to align their instincts with one's own design. What was that, if not conquest wearing white robes? The Council had answered this before. Consent existed, they said, in service. Republic soldiers knew Jedi supported them. Battle meditation did not enslave. It harmonized. It elevated. It was no more violation than a commander's speech before battle. But a speech could be refused in the hidden chambers of the heart. Battle meditation left no such chamber untouched. "Open a channel to Admiral Varth," Bastila said. The communications officer hesitated. "The Admiral is coordinating fire lines." "Now." A moment later, the Admiral's image appeared above the projector, flickering with interference. Varth was a severe woman with dark skin, close-cropped hair, and eyes that had not slept properly in weeks. "Shan," she said. "No title. No greeting. We are out of time." "I know." "Then begin." Bastila held the Admiral's gaze. "I will not." For 3 heartbeats the bridge forgot the battle. Even the alarms seemed distant. Admiral Varth's expression did not change at first. Then something in her jaw tightened, small and fatal. "Repeat that." "I will not use battle meditation." Captain Thorne stepped toward her. "Bastila." She did not look away from the hollow. "The Sith are waiting for me to do it. Malak is waiting. He knows our fleet movements have depended on my intervention. He has arranged his attack around that expectation." This was partly true, and partly the shield she lifted because the whole truth would sound like treason to desperate men. Varth leaned closer, her blue-lit face enlarging. "If you have intelligence, give it plainly. My meditation creates a central point of failure. If Malak has devised a way to strike through it, he could break not merely our line, but the minds of those connected to me. Has he devised such a way?" Bastila's silence was answer enough for those who wanted certainty, and too much for those who feared doubt. The Admiral's voice dropped. "Are you acting on a vision?" "I am acting on judgment." "You are acting against orders." The words landed harder because they were true. Bastila felt the eyes of the bridge. Fear had turned now, becoming anger, disbelief, accusation. A young tactical aide stared at her as if she had already killed his brother. Perhaps she had. Somewhere in the Republic formation, a ship would lose the fraction of courage she might have lent it. Somewhere a pilot would turn too late. Somewhere a gun crew would miss by meters. Somewhere a transport would not escape. The Force did not spare her the knowledge. It opened her to it. "Admiral," Bastila said, "scatter the formation. Do not present the line he expects. Withdraw the medical frigates behind Terrace's gravity shadow. Let the Spire and the Valor draw pursuit while the smaller ships break for hyperspace in independent vectors. And, that is a retreat. It is survival. It is panic. It is panic, dressed as mysticism. It is refusing to fight the battle Malak prepared." Varth looked at her for a long moment. Behind the Admiral, officers moved in the frantic choreography of command. Light flashed red across the walls. Somewhere nearby, a console exploded, and the hollow shivered. When Varth spoke again, there was iron in every syllable. "You were placed aboard the Ondar Spire to preserve the Republic, not to preserve the purity of your conscience." Bastila flinched before she could stop herself. The Admiral saw it. So did Captain Forn. The Sith fleet opened fire. Space became a garden of white lances. The first barrage crossed the void with terrible elegance and struck the Republic's forward screen. Shields flared like blue glass under hammer blows. A corvette vanished in a sphere of expanding debris. 2 frigates rolled apart, venting atmosphere in bright trails. The deck under Bastila's boots trembled as the Endar Spire answered, its turbolasers throwing green fire into the dark. Men and women began shouting. Range numbers. Shield failures. Orders. Prayers. Bastila closed her eyes. For one dangerous instant, instinct rose in her like a tide. She could feel the shape of it. The fleet was there, waiting, ragged, terrified, familiar. She could still save part of it. She could still pour herself into the frightened thousands and make of them a spear. The Force opened. Not commanded. Invited. All she had to do was step through. Instead, Bastila drew one breath, then another, and held herself inside the small mortal boundary of her own skin. "No," she whispered. The word did not echo. It did not become legend. It was nearly lost beneath the thunder of the ship taking its first hit. Carth Onasi did not hear about Bastila's refusal as a philosophical argument. He heard it as a scream over the tactical net, cut short by static. By then, he was already running. The Endar Spire had become a dying city. Corridors that had gleamed white and Republic blue an hour earlier were now choked with smoke, sparks, and men dragging other men by the straps of their armor. Blast doors opened reluctantly, or not at all. Fire suppression foam drifted in the air like dirty snow. Somewhere beneath the deck, a power conduit ruptured with a roar deep enough to feel in the bones. Carth had served long enough to know the difference between a ship damaged and a ship doomed. This was the second. "Move, move!" he shouted, waving 2 technicians through a hatch before sealing it behind them. Something hammered the other side a moment later. Not debris, a fist, or a rifle stock. Then the shriek of a cutting torch began to chew at the metal. Sith boarders. He turned and nearly collided with a Republic ensign whose face was striped with blood. "Lieutenant Onasi," she gasped. "Bridge reports Jedi asset unsecured. Captain says priority extraction." Nah. Captain still alive. "I don't know." That meant no. Carth swallowed the old, useless anger that always came when another commander disappeared behind a wall of duty and flame. "Where?" "Deck 7, port command passage. Last signal moving toward escape pods." Of course she was. The Jedi who had just refused to save the fleet was still important enough to save. For half a second, Carth hated her. It came easily. with the clean taste of something familiar. He hated Jedi often these days, though he tried not to show it. He hated their calm, their riddles, their talent for arriving at disasters with ancient wisdom, and leaving ordinary soldiers to count bodies. He hated that the Republic adored them and feared them and obeyed them, depending on what hour of the war it was. He hated that Saul Karath had once spoken of them with respect before trading his uniform for Sith command. Mostly he hated needing them. Then another blast shook the corridor, and resentment became luxury. "Get to the pods," he told the ensign. "But the extraction, I'll get her." He did not wait for gratitude. The port command passage had been opened to vacuum and sealed again by emergency fields that flickered when the ship's power dipped. Beyond the translucent shimmer, stars glittered obscenely calm. Bodies floated against the field, held there with scraps of datapads and broken plating. Karth kept his eyes forward. He found Bastila at the junction near the auxiliary lifts, lightsaber drawn but unignited, standing over 3 dead Sith troopers and 1 dying Republic Marine. The Marine was trying to speak. Bastila knelt beside him, one hand pressed to his chest. Her robe was torn at the shoulder. A burn marked her cheek. She looked younger than Karth expected. Not child young, not innocent, but young in the way officers were young when command had aged them faster than years could. The Marine's fingers clutched at her sleeve. "I felt it go," he whispered. Bastila bent closer. "Felt what?" "The courage." His eyes rolled, searching for something beyond the ceiling. "For a minute I thought you were there." Then nothing. Karth stopped walking. Bastila's face changed. The Marine smiled weakly, perhaps mistaking pain for peace. "Cold after that." He died before she could answer. For 1 heartbeat, she remained kneeling. Around her, the ship moaned. The cutting torches grew louder in the distant corridor. Karth wanted to say something sharp enough to wound and useful enough to move her. What came out was, "We need to go." She looked up at him. "Lieutenant Onasi, you know me?" "I know of you." "Then you know I'm not planning to die on Deck 7 because you're having a moment." Her eyes hardened, and for a second he saw the Jedi everyone spoke about. Proud. Brilliant. Impossible to command. I was giving him comfort. He needed that 5 minutes ago when the Sith punched through our line. The words were cruel. He knew it as soon as he said them. He said them anyway. Bastila rose. "You think I do not know that? I think a lot of people are dead who expected a miracle. A miracle is not owed." "No," Karth snapped. "But orders usually are." A red blade burst through the blast door at the far end of the passage. Karth raised his blaster. Argument later. The door exploded inward. Sith soldiers came through in black armor, their visors reflecting fire. Behind them strode a dark Jedi with pale skin and a braid bound in bronze rings, his face alight with the pleasure of finding prey worthy of ceremony. His lightsaber hummed crimson in the smoky air. "Bastila Shan," he said, her full name turning in his mouth like a jewel he meant to steal. "Darth Malak wants you alive." Karth fired first. The dark Jedi flicked the shot aside without looking, but the soldiers behind him scattered. Bastila moved at the same instant, her yellow blade igniting with a sound like sunlight drawn from a wound. She met the dark Jedi halfway down the passage, and the force of their clash drove smoke away in a rippling ring. Karth had seen Jedi fight before, but never from so close. It was not graceful in the way holodramas made it seem. It was brutal, fast, intimate. Bastila fought with restraint honed to killing sharpness, every parry economical, every step chosen. The dark Jedi attacked like a man trying to carve his name into history. Their blades struck and struck again, gold and red washing the corridor walls in alternating dawn and blood. The Sith troopers tried to flank. Karth made them regret it. He dropped the first with 2 shots to the neck seal, rolled behind a half-melted service console, and fired beneath the smoke at knee joints. A second trooper collapsed screaming. The third launched a grenade that bounced once, twice, then lifted into the air as Bastila's free hand snapped outward. The grenade flew back through the ruined blast door and detonated among the reinforcements. For a moment, Karth forgot his anger. Then the dark Jedi laughed. "You could have saved them," he hissed, pressing Bastila toward the viewport field. "You could have filled their little hearts with borrowed bravery. Instead you let them die afraid." Bastila's blade trembled under the pressure of his. "You know nothing of it. I know Malak was right. Pride disguises itself so well in Jedi robes." Karth shot him in the back. The bolt did not kill him. It did make him turn. That was enough. Bastila's blade came around in a golden arc and cut through the hilt of his saber, then through the breastplate beneath. The dark Jedi fell without grandeur, surprise still bright in his eyes. For several seconds there was only the burning ship. Karth reloaded with hands steadier than he felt. "You're welcome." Bastila extinguished her blade. "I had him." "Sure." He looked very had. The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile and too weary for amusement. Then her gaze shifted past him. "More are coming. Then run." They ran. The Endar spire died around them in stages, each more intimate than the last. First the shields failed and every hit became a wound. Then the artificial gravity lurched, throwing men into walls. Then the ship-wide announcements stopped mid-syllable, leaving only local alarms and human voices. At the escape pod bay, half the pods were gone and the other half were surrounded by soldiers fighting for order against terror. Karth shoved his way through. "Republic priority extraction." The sergeant recognized Bastila and went pale. "Only 2 pods left, sir. Guidance damaged on 1. Then we take the other." A child's cry cut through the bay. Karth turned. Not a child. A young deck runner, maybe 16, pinned beneath a collapsed loading frame. 2 crewmen were trying to lift it. The bay shook again. The nearest pod's launch light turned green. Bastila was already moving. Karth grabbed her arm. "No." She looked at his hand as if astonished anyone would dare touch her. "Let go. The pod launches now or no one leaves. He is alive. So are we." For an instant, the entire war narrowed to the space between them. Her fury, his fear, the boy crying out beneath twisted metal, the Sith cutting through doors behind them, the pod waiting open like a judgment. Then Bastila pulled free. Not with the Force, with her own arm. She ran to the boy, ignited her lightsaber, and cut the frame apart while Karth cursed her with every breath in his body. The door at the rear of the bay began to glow red. Sith voices shouted beyond it. Karth fired at the seam, buying seconds from men who would have killed him for less. Bastila lifted the boy with the Force, gentle as hands beneath a sleeping infant, and sent him sliding into the arms of the crewman. "Go!" she shouted. The crewman dragged the boy into the damaged pod. "That one has no guidance," Karth roared. "Then guide it manually. I'm a pilot, not a saint. Today you may have to be both." The Sith breached. Blaster fire filled the bay. Karth shot 1 trooper, then another, then felt heat tear across his side. He stumbled, caught himself, and saw Bastila standing between the escape pods and the Sith, golden blades spinning through red fire. She did not look like a legend. She looked like a woman who had refused a god's power, and now had only her body left to spend. "Onasi!" she shouted. The last intact pod began its launch countdown. He could leave her. The thought came clear as a bell. He could step backward, seal the hatch, and tell the Republic that Bastila Shan had died aboard the Undar Spire after refusing to do the one thing she had been sent to do. Some would call it justice. Some would call it tragedy. Karth could call it survival. Instead, he ran forward, grabbed her by the back of her robe, and hauled her bodily into the pod. She struck the hatch controls with the force as a crimson blade cut the air where her head had been. The pod launched. The Endar spire filled the viewport behind them, broken and burning above terrace. Around it, the Republic fleet scattered in ragged fragments, no longer one shining line, but 100 wounded creatures fleeing into the dark. Sith ships pursued some, destroyed others. Let a few go, perhaps by accident, perhaps by design. Bastila sat opposite Karth, breathing hard. The escape pod shook as it hit atmosphere. Neither spoke. Below them, terrace waited, glittering and doomed. Darth Malak had imagined Bastila's mind opening like a gate. He had prepared for it with patience unusual enough that his officers had mistaken it for calm. For 3 days, the Leviathan had drifted beneath false transponder ghosts while scout ships whispered back Republic positions. For 3 nights, Malak had stood alone in his meditation chamber. Not in prayer, never in prayer, but in predatory stillness, teaching himself the flavor of Bastila's power as remembered from Revon's fall. He remembered the instant she had touched the battle. He had been on his own bridge then, watching Revan's flagship reel beneath Republic assault, feeling his master's attention divided between the war outside and the Jedi strike team cutting its way within. Malak had hated that division. He had hated the certainty that Revan, even surprised, even betrayed by circumstance, would somehow turn the trap inside out and emerge with another impossible victory. Then Bastila's meditation had entered the chaos. Not like thunder, like dawn. Republic fighters that should have broken had surged. Boarding teams had found courage beyond discipline. Jedi had pressed through corridors where Sith troopers should have drowned them in fire. Malak had felt the shift, subtle but undeniable, and in that shift he saw the first true crack in Raven's legend. So he had fired. Not at the Republic, at Revandai. The memory still pleased him. Yet in the pleasure lay the thorn. Bastila Shan had survived. Revan had vanished into rumors and Jedi lies. The Republic had staggered onward, wounded but not dead. And everywhere Malak struck, he found her unseen hand stiffening their resistance. He had come to Terrace to break that hand. He had ordered psychic snares woven through the assault pattern by dark adepts captured from Korriban's lesser tomb schools. He had positioned assassins aboard boarding craft not to kill Bastila, but to frighten her, to force her deeper into the meditation until her awareness stretched thin across thousands. Then, at the height of her exertion, Malak intended to strike through the bond of battle itself. Pain amplified by fear. Fear amplified by death. A scream passed from ship to ship until Republic courage became Republic madness. It would have been beautiful. Instead, she had denied him. On the bridge of the Leviathan, officers kept their triumph quiet because Malak's displeasure had entered the room before his words did. Terrace filled the viewport below, clouds smeared with the glow of orbital fire. Pieces of the Endar spire fell toward the planet in bright, dying lines. Admiral Saul Kareth stood near the holotable with his hands clasped behind his back. Of all Malak's servants, Saul alone seemed able to occupy silence without shrinking. His uniform was immaculate. His expression remained that of a man studying a game whose rules were interesting but not personal. That was not the expected outcome, Saul said. Malak turned his head slowly. The servos in his prosthetic jaw gave a faint mechanical hum. No. Republic losses are severe. Their formation collapsed after the first exchange. Not collapsed, Malak said. Released. Saul's brow lifted slightly. Malak approached the holotable. Red icons marked Sith vessels in pursuit arcs around Terrace. The Republic fleet had indeed broken, but not as a panicked herd. Some ships fled into hyperspace. Others dove toward Terrace. A handful doubled back in suicidal feints to cover transports. It was ugly, costly, imperfect. It was not the route his trap should have produced. She warned them, Malak said. Bastila. She refused to meditate because she sensed danger. Saul considered that. Then she is more cautious than intelligence suggested. She is more afraid. The word pleased Malak. Fear was honest. Fear could be followed. Fear left tracks even Jedi could not hide. A communications officer turned from his station. "My lord, boarding parties report the Jedi escaped the Endar Spire in an escape pod.